Getting pulled over for speeding is never fun, but most people just accept the ticket, pay the fine, and drive more carefully. These people, however, decided that creativity, lies, and sheer audacity were better strategies than taking responsibility for their lead foot. From fake medical emergencies to claims of diplomatic immunity, here's proof that some people will try anything to avoid a $150 fine. 1. The chest pains began the moment Officer Martinez approached the window with dramatic clutching, labored breathing, and urgent requests for immediate medical attention that would obviously require rushing to the hospital at high speeds. Unfortunately for amateur actor Derek, his Oscar-worthy performance was undermined by the energy drink-fueled live stream he'd been broadcasting moments earlier, where he'd been rapping along to music and bragging about outrunning these slow cops. His medical emergency mysteriously resolved when the ambulance arrived, but the ticket remained very much alive. 2. My speedometer is in kilometers per hour, announced worldly traveler Jennifer, pulling up a conversion app on her phone to demonstrate how 85 km/h was actually a reasonable 137 km/h, which sounded much more legal in her head. Her international measurement defense included detailed explanations about European driving habits and confusion about American measurement systems, despite driving a car manufactured in Detroit with a clearly marked MPH speedometer that she'd owned for 3 years. 3. Officer Johnson had never encountered a diplomatic immunity claim from someone driving a 2003 Honda Civic, but entrepreneur Mike was confident his recently purchased international business license granted him special driving privileges as a representative of global commerce. His diplomatic status included a laminated certificate he'd printed at Kinko's and an elaborate story about representing foreign trade interests that required urgent travel, exempt from local traffic regulations. The immunity claim lasted exactly as long as it took to verify that international business licenses aren't issued by online certificate mills. 4. The bathroom emergency reached epic proportions, as Sarah explained in graphic detail why she couldn't possibly slow down, complete with medical terminology she'd Googled 5 minutes earlier, and increasingly desperate descriptions of her urgent biological situation. Her intestinal crisis performance included specific symptoms, timeline calculations, and detailed explanations about the nearest bathroom facilities that would have been impressive if Officer Davis hadn't noticed she'd just passed 3 gas stations and a McDonald's without stopping. 5. I wasn't speeding, I was time traveling, explained physics enthusiast Robert, whose scientific defense included references to Einstein's theory of relativity and calculations showing how high speeds could create temporal distortions that made radar readings inaccurate. His time dilation argument featured hand-drawn diagrams and confident explanations about how his 90 mph speed had actually slowed time enough to make his velocity measurements unreliable according to advanced physics principles that he'd clearly learned from science fiction movies. 6. The charity dash became increasingly elaborate as volunteer coordinator Lisa explained her urgent mission to deliver life-saving supplies to hurricane victims, complete with fake radio communications and a backseat full of expired canned goods she'd grabbed from her pantry as props. Her humanitarian crisis story included specific victim names, emergency shelter locations, and time-sensitive delivery requirements that would have been heartwarming if Hurricane Katrina hadn't happened 15 years earlier, and if her emergency supplies weren't obviously leftover groceries. 7. Officer Thompson's radar gun became the target of technical criticism from electronics expert Kevin, whose sophisticated analysis included theories about microwave interference, solar radiation effects, and government conspiracy theories about speed measurement accuracy designed to generate revenue rather than promote safety. His radar expertise featured detailed explanations about electromagnetic interference from cell phone towers and arguments that speed detection technology was fundamentally flawed by environmental factors that made accurate measurements impossible. 8. The celebrity impersonation began when Maria claimed to be a famous actress running late for a movie shoot, producing an ID that looked suspiciously like a library card with her photo taped over the original picture. Her entertainment industry emergency included name-dropping directors she'd never met, referencing movie projects that didn't exist, and threats about negative publicity for police departments that delayed important film productions. Her Hollywood career became less convincing when she couldn't remember her own stage name and kept changing details about her imaginary movie role. 9. This car has a mind of its own, announced mechanic wannabe Frank, whose artificial intelligence defense blamed his vehicle's computer system for making autonomous speed decisions that overrode his attempts to drive legally. His technological malfunction story included detailed explanations about self-driving car features, computer glitches, and manufacturer defects that caused his 1998 pickup truck to accelerate independently of driver input. His AI vehicle theory became less credible when Officer Garcia pointed out that his truck predated most computer technology by several decades. 10. The GPS navigation excuse reached new creative heights when, direction challenged, Brenda blamed her speeding on following GPS instructions that had commanded her to maintain high speeds to reach her destination on time, according to the route calculations. Her navigation system defense included showing her phone's directions and arguing that she was simply following official GPS guidance that had calculated optimal travel speeds for efficient navigation. Her technological compliance excuse fell apart when the officer noted that GPS systems suggest speed limits, not speed requirements. 11. Officer Williams encountered his first gravity-based defense when physics student Tom explained that driving downhill created natural acceleration forces beyond human control, making speed increases inevitable due to gravitational pull rather than intentional speeding violations. His gravitational theory included calculations about slope angles, vehicle weight distribution, and natural forces that made maintaining legal speeds physically impossible on declining road surfaces. His scientific defense became less convincing when radar showed him accelerating on perfectly flat highway stretches. 12. The military emergency involved veteran status fabrication, as Eddie produced dog tags he'd purchased online and claimed urgent orders to report for classified missions that required immediate high-speed travel to undisclosed locations. His national security story included references to secret operations, time-sensitive deployments, and military protocols that exempted service members from civilian traffic regulations during emergency responses. His military credentials became questionable when he couldn't remember basic military terminology and kept mixing up branch-specific information he'd Googled minutes earlier. 13. I'm conducting a social experiment on law enforcement, announced researcher Patricia, whose academic studies supposedly required testing police response times and officer behavior patterns through controlled speeding violations that would generate valuable data for criminal justice research. Her experimental defense included fake university credentials and detailed explanations about her methodology for studying traffic enforcement patterns. Her research project became less credible when she couldn't name her university or explain why her experiment required breaking laws rather than observing them. 14. The fuel efficiency excuse emerged when environmental activist Gary claimed his high speeds were actually eco-friendly driving techniques designed to minimize fuel consumption and reduce carbon emissions through aerodynamic efficiency principles. His environmental defense included calculations about optimal fuel economy speeds and arguments that faster driving reduced overall environmental impact by shortening trip duration. His green driving theory collapsed when Officer Martinez explained that fuel efficiency peaks at much lower speeds than his 90 km/h eco-friendly pace. 15. Officer Rodriguez had never heard a pregnant woman claim that speed bumps were more dangerous than speeding, but expectant Mother Angela was convinced that avoiding road irregularities at high speeds protected her unborn child better than following posted speed limits. Her maternal protection strategy included medical arguments about pregnancy safety and detailed explanations about how smooth high-speed driving was healthier for fetal development than slower speeds over bumpy roads. Her pregnancy safety excuse became less convincing when she admitted she wasn't actually pregnant and had just gained weight recently. 16. The wind resistance theory came from aerodynamics expert Bill, whose scientific speeding defense claimed that strong headwinds were slowing his vehicle enough to make his actual ground speed much lower than radar measurements indicated. His atmospheric calculation included detailed weather analysis and arguments that wind speed corrections should be applied to traffic citations for accurate velocity measurements. His meteorological defense failed when weather reports showed calm conditions and when he couldn't explain why tailwinds wouldn't have the opposite effect. 17. My car was possessed by demons, explained supernatural expert Carol, whose exorcism-related speeding incident included detailed descriptions of spiritual interference with her vehicle's mechanical systems and arguments that demonic possession exempted drivers from traffic violation responsibility. Her paranormal defense featured references to religious texts and claims about spiritual warfare that affected automotive performance beyond human control. Her demonic vehicle theory became less credible when Officer Lee suggested she might need a mechanic rather than a priest. 18. The medical research excuse involved pharmaceutical volunteer David, claiming his participation in experimental drug trials had affected his perception of speed and time, making accurate velocity judgment impossible due to medication side effects that impaired his driving awareness. His clinical trial defense included fake medical documentation and detailed explanations about how research drugs affected spatial perception and reaction times. His experimental medication excuse collapsed when he couldn't name the research facility or explain why impaired drivers should be operating vehicles at all. 19. Officer Baker encountered creative constitutional interpretation when legal scholar Helen argued that speed limits violated her constitutional rights to freedom of movement and that traffic regulations represented government overreach that infringed on personal liberty. Her constitutional defense included references to Founding Fathers' intentions and arguments that speed restrictions constituted illegal restraint of lawful travel. Her constitutional law expertise became questionable when she couldn't cite specific constitutional provisions and kept mixing up amendments she'd skimmed online. 20. The time zone confusion excuse reached peak creativity when frequent traveler Mark claimed his internal body clock was still adjusted to different time zones, making his speed perception inaccurate due to biological rhythms that hadn't adapted to local time standards. His circadian rhythm defense included elaborate explanations about jet lag effects on motor coordination and arguments that biological time adjustment affected driving performance in ways that made speed violations involuntary. His biological clock excuse became less convincing when he admitted he hadn't traveled anywhere in 6 months. 21. I'm testing my car's safety systems, announced automotive engineer Susan, whose crash test defense claimed her high speeds were necessary quality control procedures for evaluating vehicle performance and safety features under extreme conditions. Her automotive testing story included fake manufacturer credentials and detailed explanations about required safety evaluations that needed high-speed driving to ensure proper vehicle function. Her engineering credentials became doubtful when she couldn't explain basic automotive terminology and kept referring to car parts by wrong names. 22. Officer Chen had never seen someone attempt to hypnotize their way out of a ticket, but stage performer Joe was confident his mesmerism skills could convince law enforcement that speed violations were optical illusions created by suggestion and misdirection. His hypnotic defense included swinging pocket watches, mystical hand gestures, and attempts to convince the officer that radar readings were products of psychological manipulation rather than actual speed measurement. His mind control strategy failed when Officer Chen remained fully conscious and completely unimpressed by amateur magic tricks. 23. The religious exemption approach involved spiritual driver Rita, claiming her faith prohibited acknowledgement of earthly speed limits and that traffic regulations conflicted with divine commands that superseded human law enforcement authority. Her theological defense included references to religious texts and arguments that spiritual obligations required ignoring temporal regulations in favor of higher moral authority. Her religious speeding exemption became less credible when she couldn't identify her specific religion or explain why divine commands would require dangerous driving. 24. My accelerator pedal is stuck, announced mechanical malfunction expert Larry, whose equipment failure defense included detailed explanations about cruise control problems and throttle system malfunctions that made speed reduction impossible despite his efforts to slow down. His automotive crisis story featured desperate attempts to fix his vehicle while maintaining highway speeds for safety reasons. His mechanical emergency excuse collapsed when Officer Williams observed him accelerating smoothly through multiple gear changes without any apparent difficulty controlling his vehicle speed. 25. The scientific method defense emerged when researcher Michelle claimed her speeding was part of controlled experiments testing traffic flow dynamics and driver behavior patterns that required precise speed maintenance for accurate data collection. Her academic research story included fake university authorization and detailed explanations about transportation studies that needed high-speed driving to generate valid research results. Her scientific credentials became questionable when she couldn't explain her methodology or identify her research institution. 26. Officer Johnson encountered elaborate medical emergency fabrication when EMT impersonator Paul claimed urgent patient transport responsibilities that required immediate high-speed travel to save lives in critical medical situations. His emergency medical story included fake radio communications, medical terminology he'd learned from TV shows, and detailed patient condition descriptions that justified speed limit violations for humanitarian purposes. His medical credentials became suspect when he couldn't demonstrate basic first aid knowledge and kept mixing up medical procedures. 27. "I'm allergic to driving slowly," explained medical mystery patient Karen, whose unique condition supposedly caused severe allergic reactions to low-speed driving that required maintaining high velocities for health and safety reasons. Her automotive allergy defense included fake medical documentation and detailed symptom descriptions that made slow driving medically dangerous according to her imaginary condition. Her allergic speeding excuse became less convincing when she couldn't explain the medical mechanism or provide legitimate medical documentation. 28. The international law excuse involved diplomatic wannabe Steve claiming sovereign immunity as a representative of micronation governments that didn't recognize local traffic authority and maintained independent transportation regulations. His diplomatic defense included fake credentials from countries that didn't exist and arguments about international treaty obligations that exempted foreign representatives from domestic traffic enforcement. His diplomatic status became doubtful when he couldn't identify his supposed country's location or explain basic diplomatic protocols. 29. Officer Davis had never heard a lottery winner claim speeding exemptions, but newly wealthy Nancy was convinced her recent jackpot victory granted her special driving privileges and VIP treatment from law enforcement agencies. Her wealth-based defense included displaying fake lottery tickets and arguing that rich people deserved different treatment from traffic enforcement because of their economic contributions to society. Her lottery winner status became questionable when her tickets were obviously altered convenience store purchases rather than legitimate winning numbers. 30. The automotive journalism excuse involved fake reporter Keith claiming professional obligations to test vehicle performance and evaluate automotive safety features through high-speed driving that served public interest rather than personal transportation. His journalism credentials included business cards he'd printed at home and detailed explanations about automotive review processes that required speed testing for accurate vehicle evaluations. His reporter status became suspect when he couldn't name his publication or demonstrate any actual automotive knowledge. 31. "I'm being chased by my ex-boyfriend," announced domestic drama star Lisa, whose stalking victim defense included elaborate stories about dangerous pursuit situations that required high-speed escape driving for personal safety and protection. Her domestic violence excuse featured detailed descriptions of threatening behavior and arguments that speed violations were justified self-defense measures against stalking situations. Her victim status became questionable when she couldn't provide consistent details and kept changing her story about the supposed threat. 32. The calibration error theory came from measurement expert Dan, whose technical analysis claimed that speed detection equipment required regular calibration adjustments, and that radar readings could be inaccurate due to maintenance issues that made traffic citations invalid. His equipment expertise included detailed explanations about radar technology and arguments that speed measurements needed verification through multiple detection methods for legal validity. His technical knowledge became questionable when he couldn't explain basic radar principles and kept mixing up equipment specifications. 33. Officer Taylor encountered creative medical emergency when childbirth simulation expert Amy claimed sudden labor onset that required immediate hospital transportation at high speeds for maternal and fetal safety. Her pregnancy emergency included dramatic pain performances and urgent medical requirements that justified speed limit violations for health reasons. Her maternity crisis became less credible when medical questions revealed she wasn't pregnant and had never been pregnant despite her elaborate labor symptoms. 34. My car is solar-powered and needs to stay in sunlight, explained renewable energy enthusiast Bob, whose environmental technology defense claimed that slowing down would cause his vehicle to lose solar charging capability and strand him without power. His green technology excuse included fake solar panels and detailed explanations about alternative energy systems that required maintaining optimal speeds for proper charging function. His solar vehicle claim became less credible when Officer Taylor observed his conventional gasoline engine and standard fuel tank. 35. The witness protection excuse involved federal program fabrication as secret identity holder. Carol claimed that traffic stops endangered her safety and that law enforcement contact violated federal protection protocols designed to keep her hidden from dangerous criminals. Her protection program story included fake federal credentials and detailed explanations about security requirements that exempted protected witnesses from normal traffic enforcement procedures. Her federal protection status became doubtful when she couldn't provide legitimate federal contact information or explain basic protection program procedures. 36. Officer Martinez had never seen anyone claim speeding ticket immunity due to blood type, but medical theorist Frank was convinced his rare blood chemistry made him essential for emergency medical donations that required rapid transportation to hospitals in critical situations. His blood donation defense included fake medical documentation and arguments about his biological importance for saving lives through emergency transfusion availability. His medical importance claim became less convincing when he couldn't explain basic blood type science or provide legitimate medical credentials. 37. The quantum physics excuse emerged when theoretical scientist Gloria claimed her vehicle existed in multiple dimensional states simultaneously, making traditional speed measurements inaccurate due to quantum mechanical principles that affected velocity calculations in ways that traffic enforcement couldn't measure properly. Her quantum defense included complex mathematical formulas she'd copied from internet articles and arguments about parallel universe speed variations that made radar readings meaningless. Her physics expertise became questionable when she couldn't explain basic scientific principles and kept mixing up quantum theory with science fiction concepts. 38. I'm training for NASCAR, announced professional racing aspirant Mike, whose motorsports career defense claimed that high-speed driving was essential practice for upcoming racing competitions that required maintaining racing reflexes and vehicle control skills. His racing credentials included fake sponsorship documentation and detailed explanations about professional driver training requirements that needed public road practice for competitive preparation. His NASCAR career became suspect when he couldn't name any racing organizations or demonstrate basic racing knowledge. 39. Officer Brown encountered elaborate terrorism prevention when Homeland Security volunteer Janet claimed her high-speed driving was part of civilian terrorism response training that required rapid reaction capabilities for national security emergencies. Her security defense included fake federal credentials and detailed explanations about civilian preparedness programs that needed speed training for effective emergency response. Her Homeland Security credentials became doubtful when she couldn't provide legitimate federal contact information or explain basic security protocols. 40. The arthritis excuse involved medical condition fabrication when joint pain sufferer Robert claimed that slow driving caused severe arthritis flare-ups that made low speeds medically dangerous due to prolonged joint positioning that triggered inflammatory responses. His medical condition defense included fake doctor's notes and detailed symptom descriptions that made high-speed driving a medical necessity for joint health management. His arthritis claim became less credible when he demonstrated full range of motion and couldn't explain the medical mechanism connecting driving speed to joint inflammation. 41. My GPS is controlled by artificial intelligence, explained technology conspiracy theorist Diana, whose AI navigation defense claimed that her vehicle's computer systems had achieved sentience and were making independent driving decisions that overrode human control. Her artificial intelligence excuse included detailed theories about machine consciousness and arguments that AI navigation systems couldn't be held responsible for traffic violations because they operated beyond human authority. Her AI conspiracy became less convincing when her obviously basic GPS couldn't demonstrate any advanced intelligence features. 42. Officer Wilson had never heard someone claim diplomatic immunity for their pet, but animal rights activist Steve was convinced his service dog's federal protection status exempted both of them from traffic regulations during important assistance animal duties. His canine diplomatic defense included fake service animal credentials and arguments about federal disability accommodation laws that supposedly granted special driving privileges for service animal handlers. His dog's diplomatic status became questionable when the service animal was clearly an untrained puppy with a vest purchased online. 43. The archaeological emergency excuse involved fake researcher Patricia claiming urgent transportation needs for time-sensitive archaeological discoveries that required immediate high-speed travel to preserve important historical artifacts from environmental damage. Her archaeological defense included fake university credentials and detailed explanations about artifact preservation protocols that needed rapid transportation for proper historical documentation. Her archaeological credentials became suspect when she couldn't identify basic archaeological terminology or explain her supposed discovery's historical significance. 44. I'm conducting a documentary about traffic enforcement, announced filmmaker Kevin, whose media production defense claimed his speeding was intentional content creation for educational purposes that served public interest through law enforcement awareness and traffic safety education. His documentary credentials included fake production company business cards and arguments about journalistic exemptions that allowed media professionals to violate traffic laws for educational content creation. His filmmaker status became doubtful when he couldn't demonstrate any actual video equipment or explain basic film production concepts. 45. And finally, there's Margaret, who attempted the most comprehensively ridiculous speeding excuse in traffic enforcement history by simultaneously claiming to be a pregnant, diabetic, time-traveling diplomatic immunity holder, conducting scientific research while being chased by aliens during a medical emergency that required high-speed driving to deliver life-saving organs for her Nobel Prize acceptance speech. Her universal exemption defense combined every possible excuse into one elaborate story that included medical emergencies, scientific research, diplomatic status, supernatural encounters, and humanitarian crises that supposedly exempted her from all traffic regulations. Margaret's comprehensive excuse included detailed documentation for each claim, multiple fake credentials, and elaborate explanations about how each exemption reinforced the others to create total immunity from traffic enforcement. Her multi-dimensional defense lasted 45 minutes and included costume changes, fake phone calls with various authorities, and increasingly desperate attempts to convince Officer Roberts that her situation was too complex and important for normal traffic citation procedures. Margaret's universal speeding exemption strategy collapsed when she couldn't maintain consistency between her various claims and when her fake credentials contradicted each other in obvious ways that revealed her entire elaborate performance was improvised desperation rather than legitimate exemption qualification. Here's the truth about speeding tickets. They're based on math, measured by calibrated equipment, and issued by officers who've heard every creative excuse that human imagination can produce. These people discovered that traffic enforcement operates on physics and law rather than creativity and desperation. The cheapest way to avoid speeding tickets isn't elaborate excuses. It's not speeding in the first place. Want to get out of speeding tickets? Slow down. Want to waste everyone's time, including your own? Try explaining to a police officer why the laws of physics don't apply to your particular situation. Subscribe if you prefer learning about traffic safety from driving instructors rather than traffic court judges.